Hello. What I'm going to try and do is go through the basics of Cisco Packet Tracer. We'll build a very basic little network, use some of the tools in there. The aim of the game is to get you used to some of the features in here. It is not everything, but it's enough to get us going. So here we are. There is Packet Tracer opened up. This is version 7, so 7.0306, whatever it is. And it's an instructor or teacher version. There's also a student version. This one gives us a few extra features. You can have them if you like, but they won't give you much more functionality for your course. So here it is, Packet Tracer. What is it? It's a little network simulator. We can simulate a whole range of different things. They've just added to it with different components and things. If you're playing with Internet of Everything or Internet of Things, there's too many things going on at the moment, but anyway. We're using it to simulate networks as far as Cisco sees the world, so routers, switches, PCs, phones, gateways, ASA firewalls, a few other bits and pieces. So this is where we're going to start. So this is our workbench really, reasonably large size. We tend to make smallish networks, and it's a good place to learn. Most of the commands that you will need are in here. There is still a few that actually on real gear, but not in here. But most of the stuff you need to get your CCNA exists in here. So what we'll do is build a little network, and as we go through, click on little bits and pieces to make it a bit more user friendly. So by default we end up with network devices. So down the bottom left here we've got all these different spots that we can play with. So network devices here gives me a series of routers. That's a symbol for a router. Some newer ones, some ones for warehouses, and others which are a bit older. Most of this is for branch networks. They're not real big internet-based routers. These are relatively small. The CCNA generally looks at medium-sized businesses, and that's what we're playing with here, is those devices, but the functionality is the same. So network devices on the bottom left, and underneath it we've got routers, switches. So there's a range of switches, so layer 2 switches, layer 3 switches, hubs, which we tend to try and avoid a bit, but there's always a need for them. Different wireless type networks, so if you're building little home networks, then they're existing in there. ASA, adaptive security appliance, so firewalls, and WAN emulation, so wide area network, DSL modem, cable modem. You can almost build a little network like you'd have at home and see if it works. So you can use this as simulation gear as well. So that's just network devices. Most of the time we'll actually be playing with that. We will go to end devices at some point. In here we've got a generic PC or a laptop or a server or a printer, IP phone, VoIP phones, analog phone, bunch of other stuff in there. For your home use, with this version of Packet Tracer we've added, there has been added a whole range of different sensors and things, so you can build Internet of Things devices for home. So, I don't know, your garage door. If you get into the Internet of Things, then you will have Arduino and Raspberry Pi type components in there which you can program should you choose to, and you can build little home networks and play around with that. But that's outside the scope of CCNA. Go for it if you like. Smart City has, again, all these different detectors and other bits and pieces. So, yep, industrial and power grid, which is kind of cute. So, network devices, end devices we're playing with. We won't be using much of that. We will be using some connections. So different types of connections across here, and we'll go through a couple of them at least. when we connect up. We can use the console, and we will be using consoles on physical gear. Definitely copper straight through, copper crossover, so Cat5, Cat6, and serial cables when we connect router to router. And then there's a few other things in there. Octal I really don't know what is, but yeah, USB. So it's kind of funky. There's a lot of things in there. So what we should do is actually build a little network. So let's chuck in a router for a start. So we'll get a 1941 router. So if I put my mouse over the icon and click on it, drag it in, then I have a router on my desktop. Let's add another couple of devices. So we'll get some switches. So click on switches down here, and I'm going to get 2960 switches, and we'll pop that there, and we can keep dragging that, and that's all fine. Looks okay so far. Let's get some cables. Actually no, we won't. We'll get some PCs, so generic PC there, and we'll chuck another one in there. So again, just clicking on them and dragging them over. So with that really basic network design, what we should do is actually cable it up. So we'll go into connections, and there's copper straight through. Now I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different connections, and I don't want to keep clicking and dragging with these connections. What I'm going to do is go over and hold down the control key, which you actually can't see at the moment, and then click on that, and it comes up with this little cross down there. Now the connector looks like a little RJ45 connector at the end of your cable, and we click on our device. We will click on the network card. So we have 2 USB connections and an RS232, which is your serial port on the back of your PC. We want our fast Ethernet. We're networkers, we're not playing with the other stuff just yet. And we'll click onto our switch, and we need to choose one of these ports to plug into, not the console. It won't work. Different protocols and everything exists in there, so it doesn't matter which one. We'll just click on that and it connects in. At the moment I don't have any information about what we've clicked on, but that's okay. I'll come back to that. So with my little icon there, I'm still holding down the control key, and I can click from device to device. Now I'm just choosing random ports to connect to. It really doesn't matter, except when we get up here at the moment. For now it doesn't matter, let's just say that. And there we have it, it's all cabled up. And if I hit escape, I get rid of my icon, I'll go back to the arrow. So there we have a little network built. It doesn't give us much information, but it's okay, it's sitting there. So just to recap what we have done, we went to network devices, we grabbed a 1941 router, dragged it up there, popped it on there. We then went to some switches, and we got these 2960 switches and dragged them up there as well. We thought it would be good to get some PCs, so we clicked on our end devices and we grabbed a generic PC. We didn't grab the laptop, we didn't grab the server or printer or anything else. We want PCs in our case, so all good. To cable it together, I then went to connections, and I used copper straight through. So in our network up here, straight through copper cable is what we want. We don't want crossover, we don't want console, we don't want phone lines or coaxial or fiber. We want copper straight through, and that's good for us. That's all Ethernet based networks. So we need to see, and your screen may be different if you're doing this at the same time as you've got Packet Tracer. I've actually gone onto my options up the top here and changed my preferences. So let's have a look at that. Under options, preferences, or Control R if you want, we can see what preferences we actually want to run. So I can click on boxes, and if I show device model labels, it comes up and says this is a 1941 router and a 2960 24TT switch down there. I know it's a switch because of the icon. The 2960 is the model that Cisco produced. So if I want to see those headings underneath my devices, then I'll have that box checked. You can kill that. Device names, so this one is actually called router 1, switch 0, switch 1. So you can work your way through these things. Our port labels is actually not a bad one to have, and our link lights as well. So if you have at least those two, then that's fine. There's a bunch of other stuff in here, but you can play around to suit yourself. While we're in here, the only other thing I've ever really suggest playing with is the font size. So how big the font is going to be on your desktop, how big it is going to be through your application. So if you want to change it on the screen, then move that slide bar up and down. The command line interface, which I'll show you in a minute, that's going to be that size, and there's other font sizes we can muck around with. I've changed these. It's up to you what you want. Work with it and get to a place that you're comfortable with. Okay, so let's have a look at our network now. It's kind of nice because it's giving us a bit more information. Information is good on a network diagram as long as it doesn't clutter everything. What this is saying is on that router we have plugged into a port which is the gigabit Ethernet port. So later on we'll cover these, but at the moment we know that the port is 0/0 up there. On the switch it's plugged into gigabit 0/1. We need to know those ports because we're going to configure them with different information. So a bit more information in there. We're building a network diagram, gives us information when we need to configure it, but at the moment we're playing with packet tracer. Okay, so all well and good. What have we actually achieved? Well, very little. We've got a nice graphic. We can move things around, so if you click on that you can move your PC out to the left there. If you want to move both of these devices, just highlight both of them, move them both, and it all moves around. If you want to move the whole lot, grab it, move it around. Feel free to do whatever it is you feel like doing. So yeah, I like it looking kind of organized, even though having all these labels to me is not organized, but that's just me. Okay, so we've got a router up here. At the moment that interface is turned off. We'll come to that a bit later, and what I'd like to do is actually look at what the router actually looks like. So if I click on it, so left mouse click, I get a view of actually the physical view of the router here. This is what they actually look like. A little bit small, but anyway, that's okay. We can live with that. We can zoom in and get a bit of a closer look if you need to. On the well, effectively it's actually the back of a router. You've got gigabit 00 and 01 are two ports we can play with. There's a couple of console ports down here which we will be using, and then there's a couple of expansion slots in here. And for most of our work we're actually going to add this type of card in. It's an HWIC 2T. So there are different types of modules we can add in over here. The one we play with, is the HWIC 2T, and we need to add this card to this router. So once I've highlighted or clicked on that and I've got my HWIC 2T card down here, I can drag it up and try and drop it into my router, but it doesn't like that because the router is powered on. So we actually have to turn the router off. Just like real life, you don't just add cards, it's not all hot swappable. So let's turn our router off. So there's the power button. We'll zoom in, there's the power button, and if you click on that, I don't know if you saw that, it changed from green to nothing. And let's drag our card in there now, and that takes it, and we'll turn it on. Now this router is an 1841. We could have put the card in there or there. It does have an impact on the name given to the interface. These two interfaces will become serial 0/0/0 and 0/0/1 for serial interfaces. If they were in this slot, it'll be 0/1/0 and 0/1/1. Sounds very painful, but that's okay, we can live with that. Okay, so what we've done is configured our router there by adding, well, not configured it, but just added some extra hardware to it. Let's just pop out of that. And actually what I want to do is copy this router now. So up the top here we've got a copy function, and I'll paste another router in there. So now I've got another router with our HWIC 2T card in it, ready to go. Not the bog standard one we buy. It's got some functionality to it. Fortunately we're in our connections tab at the moment, so still in connections. I'm going to grab our serial DCE cable, and I'm going to connect our serial 0/0/0 to serial 0/0/0 on the other router, and that's good. When we connect our routers across a WAN interface, wide area network, in our case we're using serial cables. We can manipulate them and play around with different stuff in them. That's what we need. Most of our course, when we connect from router to router, will actually be involved with these cables. So knowing how to get them in there in Packet Tracer is a good thing. Okay, I'm just going to clean up. I'm not going to show my port labels. I'll keep my link lights. So under my preferences, my interface, that to me is a bit cleaner. So what we're actually building to some extent here is a little branch network. Doesn't really look like it, but it's all very logical, and we're connected through it and all the rest. So yeah, things we can do. So within Packet Tracer we've added our devices, we've connected stuff, we've added new hardware onto our routers. In here, the look and feel of the whole place, if we want to add a little note beside it. Whoops. Very lame, hello. We can add little notes across our network. That's good. If you want to delete something, be careful of it. Click on the delete. It says we've selected something and you're sure you want to delete it. Now the selection is actually that PC at the moment, and actually no, I don't want to delete that. So just be careful with this delete function. It does get a bit tricky sometimes. But we've changed our cursor. So I can click on that, or let's just delete our PC. Wipes out the cable because the PC is not there anymore. And if that's all I want deleted, then I need to hit escape to change my cursor back. So I'm not in delete mode anymore. Let's see if we can undo that. So that's good. So undelete, undo, redo, back up there. If you want to zoom in, have a closer look at stuff. Go back and zoom out, make things smaller, and get back to our what's it called? Zoom reset. So back to the normal size that we play with. We can add a few colors into the background if you want squiggly things, round things, rectangular, or lines. I normally go with rectangles actually, or squares or whatever, and I put a color in them. So rectangle, fill color, select the fill color, and it gives us a little option here. You can play with these and make up your own. So there's that's a nice bad color, isn't it? And hit OK there. we're still in our mode. So I would say, well, let's highlight from there across to there. So well, there's a network that we can play with. It's actually a broadcast domain if you want to get technical, but we've highlighted a bit of our workspace that we can break things up with, so that's quite nice. Let's hit escape out of that, so I don't want to create more squares around the joint. So suddenly we've got a bit of interest in there as well. No, we don't need much more than that. There's probably other stuff that I've forgotten just in there, but for now that's okay. So let's actually get this thing running and see what we can do with it. Actually, there's one more tab up here. I'll just show you just for the few giggles. This packet tracer does allow us to have towns, cities, and really intercity and connect things up. So you can put a network down here in that little town and connect it into that bigger city, or go to that suburb or town that's out there. You can have your devices sitting across there, but most of the time, if you just keep clicking on the one that's given to us, we actually end up in a building, and we end up in a wiring closet. So there's our router, there's our 3 switches, there's our other router, all sitting in the same server room, really. If you want to go back out of that, you can see our 2 PCs are actually sitting potentially in different spaces inside an office. So we can play with physical stuff. There's no real need to, from our perspective. It's nice to play with that. You can manipulate it all and build some relatively complex networks out of it. That's a physical view of the world, and this is our logical view of the world. Even though those PCs are plugged straight in, they're in separate rooms to the switches and the 2 routers. In fact, these routers should be in different towns actually. But yeah, play with it if you like. Physical view. Keep clicking back to get yourself a slightly higher view of everything. And you can create new stuff if you like. Okay, in our logical view, which is where we're going to spend most of our time, we need to configure stuff. So when we configure our switches and routers, we'll actually be using a thing called the command line interface. So putting the mouse over does give us information, but let's just click on a device and we get a physical view of the device. But there's a little tab up here called the CLI. The config tab you can use. You can say what VLAN and what's it actually going to do, but only use this if you're really not sure. The CLI is where we're going to spend most of our time. And I've just typed in Control Z there, just to get back to where we should be at the start. Actually, even before that, you'll end up at that spot. So that device is called switch, and this is where we'll spend most of our time actually playing with our devices, because physically we don't use GUIs a lot. We still have to configure at least basic stuff graphically. Not graphically, sorry, CLI. And most of the course will be done via the command line as well. So in Packet Tracer, the command line is that one, and we won't do anything there. We can type in commands and change where we are in the operating system. And I'll come back to these commands later on. So we again change where we are in the operating system, and once we get to places like this, then we can type in some commands. So I've just said there that the host name for this device is going to be called SW-1, and there it is, it's changed it immediately. And we're still in config mode, and we'll exit out of that. We'll go back to a thing called privilege exec mode. So that's where we will be playing. Nice to know. The config button up there does give us some options for ourselves. VLANs we'll be playing with, adding different interfaces to different VLANs and doing things to them. But most of the time, again, the CLI, you can see, will be where we're playing with. You can actually see just something there as a matter of interest. If I go onto Fast Ethernet 06 and click on that, then I've actually just typed in, if you like, interface Fast Ethernet 06. How about I go to the VLAN database and let's type in a VLAN number there, 100. Give it the name Bob, because Bob's a good name, and we'll add that VLAN number to it. And it's actually given us the commands. These are commands you will be using. In the CLI up here, the same commands exist. So at the bottom of the config, if you're unsure about what you're trying to do, and there is a thing in the config mode that helps you, then you can go in and manipulate. But use it as a learning tool. Use the CLI for everything else. So far so good actually. One thing about the CLI, we'll come back to console cables here. We can't just click on a switch and go pop in the physical world and gain access to it that way. We actually have to add a cable, and it's a console cable. Generally connects from a serial connection on the back of your PC to the device. So here's a console cable. Let's connect from this PC, from the RS-232 into that device or that device or that device. We can choose which devices we're connecting to. So the cables are actually quite short, so all these devices would have to be within 2 meters of the PC, but anyway. So let's connect to this device here, because we've just manipulated that with the CLI and config. But let's just click on that and we connect to the console port. Now the console port is on the back of routers and it's on the back of switches as well. So learn which is the front and which is the back of your devices. So the two cables sitting side by side don't make it look too good, so I'll just move it up there. So we've now got 2 connections into the switch. And some people get confused that the console cable is using a completely different method of communication than our network cable. So when we run a terminal emulation program on our PC, then we can connect via console to the device that we're connecting to. So it actually, the terminal emulation program will actually connect through our serial port, so our RS-232 port, and we will plug straight into what's effectively an RS-232 or serial port at the other end and gain access to it. And we can do this in Packet Tracer. We'll click on that PC. We do get a bit more of a graphical thing to play with. So there's config, which we normally don't play with unless you're going to change the display name. Our desktop is actually where we're going to manipulate. So here is our terminal. So there's a command prompt and a bunch of other stuff for us to play with later. But for now, our terminal is the one we want. And the standard connection to a Cisco device is this. So the baud rate, or bits per second, that we're going to send through, which is incredibly slow, 9,600 bits per second. Of that, we're going to send 8 data bits. We're not going to have any parity, and there's going to be 1 stop bit. And that's the data we're going to send through. So let's click OK there. And we have access, and you may not actually see this too well at the moment, but we have access to our data. So let's see if we can change that up a bit. Hopefully I picked the right ones. Button label shouldn't be it. I may have missed it. Go back to that. Go back to our terminal. Hit OK again. No, it didn't change anything. I don't know if you can see that on the screen, but we've got the same level of access to that switch that we had in the CLI of the switch. So if we bring up the CLI over there, we'll drop that down and just show you the two side by side. They're effectively the same. So if I exit that level, we're actually mimicking the CLI on the other side. So via the PC, via a console cable, is how we're going to manipulate our devices physically. In Packet Tracer we don't need to do that. It's a complete waste of time. You might as well just click, well, don't do that, click on the device, hit the CLI, and you're in. No point in adding a console cable at all. So let's kill that one. So again, do you want to delete the selected item? No. And let's just pop that out of there and hit escape so I don't delete everything. Looks like a bit of a running man at the moment, doesn't it? Get his foot further in. Anyway, so all good. Now there's one other little thing that we need to play with at the moment, just to get a feel for our network and other stuff. Down the bottom right here, we're actually in real-time mode. So anything we do, we change the configuration of whatever, hit enter, poof, it's up and like real life. But we can go into a thing called simulation mode. And this is pretty handy. And it's very handy to actually looking at how packets flow through your network, get a feel for if it's working, where it's failing. We're using it as a learning tool, so let's do it. Let's get a simulation happening and see that the whole thing actually works. So I'll go back to real time, and what I'm going to do is just add a couple of, we'll kill that, a couple of IP addresses to our two devices. So I should pop back a minute there. So let's click on, left click, onto the PC, and on my desktop tab at the top there, I'm going to go into my IP configuration, which is this button here. Click on that, and I'm going to put an IP address into that. So I'm just going to use a classic C class address. So 192.168, and we'll make this one 10.1. Click on the subnet mask. Automatically gives us 255.255.255 as our subnet mask. That's good. We can copy that one. Let's just copy that address. We're not going to put a default gateway in because I'm not going to connect to this router at the back here. I'm just going to connect to this PC. So I want a similar network number or IP address. So that's in there. Good. Close that. Let's go on to our next PC. So PC1. And we'll go on to desktop again. Go to IP configuration. Again, it's a static address I'm putting in. And I'll paste it in here, but we can't have this exact same address. Let's just go .2, and again the same subnet mask. We're not using IP version 6, although we will be covering it. At the moment, these are both good, and both PCs should be able to ping each other, or at least send data and connect to each other. But let's see how it all goes. So I'm in simulation mode down the bottom right here, and what I want to do is send a ping from this PC to that PC. Two ways I can do it. I can click on the device, I can go to my command prompt. Now that's a very bad color, isn't it? Hopefully you can read it. Now I can type ping 192.168.10.2, and that would start the simulation, but I don't want to do that. So I'll just leave this one. I'll just get rid of it actually. Kill that, In simulation mode we do have this little simple add simple PDU. PDU stands for Protocol Data Unit, and it's a ping. So that protocol that it's actually using is ICMP. We can add complex PDUs if we want to add more information, but let's just use a simple one for now. So we'll click on that, and we get a little envelope as an icon for our mouse, and we go, I want to go from there to there. And two packets have popped up. No, not two packets, two envelopes if you want to use the eyes. So let's have a look at the top up here. The first one says use ICMP because that's what ping uses. And through your course you need to get to know these. ICMP would like to work, but this PC does not know the MAC address of that PC, so it has to send out an ARP. So it's going to send it into our switch network and broadcast it across the network. At the moment it's not going to go very far because there's only 2 lines, but let's just go and see what actually happens in here. So we can auto capture or we can capture forward. So I'll capture forward by clicking on that once. The PDU goes to the next device along. Click on it again and it goes to the next device along that it can. Click on again, it goes to the next device. Click on again, it goes to the next device. Now you go, well, how did it know to go down there? Well, that's the only path. If we had actual other connections across this whole network, it will broadcast across there. And this machine will return that ARP, and now you see the other ICMP packet pop up, and that's the actual ping, and it works its way through. So we've pinged the other device and it returns it back. So it's really just sending out an echo and an echo request, and we're happy. Other protocols start running. So Cisco Discovery Protocol is in there. You might find in your simulation that you have a success option down here. So was that ping successful? So yep, use it, but understand what's actually happening underneath everything there. Okay, so at the moment that's what we've got. We can reset our simulation. It goes back to there. We can auto capture, and without clicking on the capture forward, it'll just keep running through pretty slow. So drag our little tab across just to speed it up, and yep, it's going flying now. And that's just pinging. It hasn't done the ARP because the devices have actually found out. So there's another protocol that's popping up, Spanning Tree Protocol, another one that you'll learn. And yeah, it keeps running all over the shop. Now we can edit our filters. So look, I want to, under IP4, I only want ARP and ICMP. I want to get rid of all those. There used to be a way of doing it, can't remember what it was. Let's just get rid of Dynamic Trunking Protocol, and we'll get rid of Spanning Tree Protocol. So we don't see them. Okay, you see them running across there. And they should just show what's going through. And CDP, we didn't uncheck the box. So there's bits and pieces we can play with, so let's just stop that. It's a learning tool. So up here we haven't configured these devices, so nothing's actually happening up here yet, but when we get to it we can play with it. A couple of other things down the bottom here, so let's actually get out of simulation, go back to real time. Let's say we want to turn all these devices off and on. So if you remember this device, we change it to switch 1. Let's just power cycle our devices. All our configurations will be lost because we did not save them. Had we saved them, we should be right. So that's power cycling. We can fast forward time a bit, and that saves us sitting there waiting for things to converge. Not a bad little button to have. Unfortunately, in the real world, we can't do it. So all good. Hopefully there's enough in there to get started with Packet Tracer, build basic networks. It's a very handy learning tool for you. Use it a lot at home. Make your own networks, try different things out. During the course, you will be getting some assessments that are actually in Packet Tracer, or even learning things to do, and it'll actually self-assess you. We can set them up so you can get a grade out of 100 for a Packet Tracer exercise. More involved than what we've done, but yeah, all good. So have a play with it, and we'll work on from there. Cheers.